Please welcome to the AI Plus career stage, the Director for Tech Policy at the United States State Department, Mr. Justin Reynolds.
This is the most exciting intro I think I've ever had in a speaking engagement. Wow, super awesome on day 3 of a conference to come in with that amount of energy. So thank you, and thank you to Nandita and Ryan and others at SCSP. As he said, I'm Justin. I'm currently at the State Department leading the teams and the Office of the Special Envoy for Critical and Emerging Technology. The government is really bad at naming things, so it's very long. But I guess before I get started, I'm curious, who all is in the audience? Do we have any students or recent graduates? A couple, all right. Do we have people who are current or recent feds that might be looking to make a pivot? A few? You don't have to necessarily. All right, and then anyone looking to come into public service when hiring resumes again? All right, we got some. All right, cool. So I think the reason I'm here today is, one, my title has AI in it, so it's a little bit relevant. But also, I've made a whole series of pivots over the course of my career. I'm a recidivist at the State Department. My first go-around, I pivoted from China to the Middle East to Russia. You might have questions about why our HR won't let me use the same alphabet twice. But that's the way my career went the first go-round. I then went to Facebook, where I worked in the CEO and COO's office, leading teams called Strategic Response, which only a consultant could love that name. It doesn't really mean anything on its surface, but it was looking at how to prevent those platforms from being used to incite violence. I then took over election policy teams and ran the insider threat team as well for a few years before pivoting to a fintech startup called Robinhood. And then finally, I came back about 2.5 years ago to the State Department to help set up an office that was birthed actually out of SCSP. It's how does the State Department organize our international tech diplomacy to make sure we stay ahead of China in AI, biotech, and quantum. So that's where I'm coming from. I'll give 3 quick pieces of career advice, and then I really want to open it up to Q&A to see if there's anything that I can do to be helpful to any of you. And I guess part of why I'm slightly qualified to be on this stage and talk about career advice, for the last 5 years, I've helped co-lead a group for people looking to leave the federal government. It's a Facebook group because everyone's time in public service eventually comes to an end, and usually not when they're done working for good. And so I made it to Facebook with the help of other former public servants, and so I've been trying to pass on some of those learnings. Over those 5 years, I've helped several hundred people make the pivot to whatever comes next, just on a volunteer basis. And so similarly at Facebook and Robinhood, I hired a lot of people, a lot of them out of public service, because I think the tech industry certainly can learn a lot from things that are very obvious to people here in Washington. And alternatively, people in Washington can learn a lot from things that are obvious to folks in tech. So the first thing is making sure that on your resume or in your interview, make sure whatever you include on there, and you've all done incredible, amazing things, answers the question, will you solve the problem we're hiring for? You know, I see a lot of good friends in here, and they've had a lot of really awesome experiences. And so, like, you know, being perhaps a lawyer in Baghdad might not answer the question of what I'm hiring for if it's a comms role. But, you know, what are the things that show me that you're, you know, from that experience, you're going to be awesome at filling a communications lead position. That's both for the real estate on your resume and in the interviews. In the interviews, the things that federal employees struggle the most with is actually claiming credit for the incredible impact you have. So it isn't enough to just say, oh, I worked on managing relations with Russia. That doesn't work. What was the impact of what you did, and why did it matter? And then the last part is taking time to know who you're talking to and their background. So if you're, you know, talking to Ryan at SCSP who pulled this together, you know, knowing that he started out as a minister, like, that's kind of relevant. He studied in Pennsylvania, which is where I was until I moved back to DC about 2 years ago. Things that aren't obvious, you know, yes, we have the obvious connection. We both worked on the National Security Council. He's a really awesome thinker on critical tech competition, but taking the step back, and everyone's info is pretty much now on LinkedIn, and if not, you know somebody who knows somebody that can kind of give you some of that insight. That's all the prepared remarks I'm going to make, because I want to hear from you. Let's take this conversation any way you want to go. If you want to talk tech competition with China instead of careers, we can do that. What's on your mind? It's early. Hopefully you're not glazed over from an insane number of presentations already today. and how can I be helpful to you? So, anyone have thoughts, questions? Everyone's quiet. Yeah. Yep.
I don't exactly know where to pivot to.
Sure. So I think the first part is trying to understand the scope of things that are out there. So like if you say you want to go work in tech, that could mean just about anything. Within Facebook, we had 1,000 different teams that could benefit from DC type experience, and government affairs is like the most obvious one, going in and talking to other governments. But there's a whole slew of teams that are opaquely named, like threat intel, threat discovery, imminent risk, risk and response, content policy, product policy. And so it's getting to know people in the company and understanding what the different teams do, what their pain points are, and then how your experience might fit in and be interesting for you to make an impact. So it's getting to know people. When Robinhood had their 3 rounds of layoffs, eventually my org was eliminated. And so what I was doing when I was looking for roles was figuring out which companies did I admire and did they have people that I thought I really respected. And then I just got to know them and tried to figure out where their pain points were. And then when roles would come up, it made it a lot easier to try to then go in and say, all right, I want to work on, this type of product or this type of problem at a given company. But I think getting to know the people first and the companies is most helpful. Yeah.
You've been doing this for, helping people find jobs for, about 5 years now. You said I'm sure it's been challenging that entire time for a lot of people, but especially now with so many federal workers, being laid off and being ripped and so on. Is there anything for people, for federal workers looking to make a pivot to the private sector at this time? Such a glut of maybe folks with similar skills or at least, similar resumes.
Yeah.
Is there anything, that folks should be doing differently or things that you're, advising people differently now than in past years?
Yeah, I think it's becoming the market is hard right at this exact moment because of the sheer uncertainty. So both you have a large number of people who have either been laid off or have taken the fork and left government service all at once. And alternatively, a lot of especially the biggest companies are seeing uncertainty and are just pausing their hiring. And so that puts kind of a double crunch on the DC space for this exact moment in time. So I think in the interlude, as you're looking in, and if there isn't a role that pops up right away, like, I'm sorry, I've been there, it's really rough, and it's stressful because you've been successful and you're like, why isn't there a whole bunch of people coming to me right now? Learning to speak the language. So, in the government, we say interagency. In tech, they say cross-functional. So how do you translate your ability to, if you can move from DoD to state to the intel agencies, you can sure as a heck move from different teams within Google. One of the things I tell foreign service officers is, look, if you can get parachuted into, Beirut and work there for 2 years and then go to Panama and then go to somewhere else, you're going to be just fine, like very quickly getting up to speed at Palantir or Google or wherever. And you just need to reframe your experience that way. And so it's talking to people in those companies. People do want to help and be supportive, even if they don't have a job right now. But trying to learn the language so you sound like you're already there. It's one reason why interns get hired so often is they're already fluent in the organizational speak and structure. And then when hiring resumes, whenever that will be, you'll be best positioned to be one of the first people that comes to mind. This is DC. People are definitely not that shy. What's up, John? So, as a current government employee, that's a loaded question. Oh, his question was if I was in charge of Doge, what would I have focused on? So I will say one thing that came out today that I think is a very welcome change is to get into the senior executive civil service. If you've ever looked at that process, you have to write a 10-page essay, which I'm sorry, this isn't a master's program. No one wants, on the hiring side, no one wants to read a 10-page essay. And alternatively, if we're trying to recruit and retain the best talent, especially from the outside, that process is ridiculous. So reforming things like the hiring process. The last administration came up with the direct hire authority at the State Department and other places so that we, as hiring managers, could immediately just see the first, I think it's 150, 200 applicants, and then send the ones that we wanted to interview to HR. It's not a perfect system. It doesn't reduce, it still has problems, but it doesn't involve sending everything to Charleston, letting it sit for a long period of time because they've got a backlog, and then getting some small selection of resumes that may or may not actually address the problems you've faced. And I mean, we saw this at Facebook too, like the HR business partners often wouldn't really understand exactly what you're screening for if I didn't communicate that really well. It's even harder in the federal government when like it's an HR system that's not even co-located in the same state. So how do you speed that up? I would work on figuring out how to streamline the clearance process. Like if we want to attract and retain the best people, like it doesn't, I hired a presidential innovation fellow who had a clearance at OMB, and it took me months to get that clearance transferred to state. Like it's absurd. So trying to really speed those types of things up. And then there were redundancies, like in both the State Department and other agencies, and so like figuring out where those were, you know, and recognizing that, you know, it's wonderful, very talented people in those offices that might have very strong overlap, and so how do you, you know, gracefully help them work in a more efficient way and kind of reduce some of that overlap. All right, now we got questions. Yeah.
Yes, hi, Justin. Thank you
Yeah.
for coming to us. Question one, when do you expect the hiring freeze to resume? Like, especially for someone like me who speak perfect fluent Chinese
Mm-hmm.
and who speak to our audience all around the world, marketers, Silicon Valley, what is your recommendation to me in a resume that I want to help the United States to win a competition?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know when exactly the hiring freeze will be lifted. It's scheduled to continue at least through July. So we'll see. I don't, if I could predict, if I was very good at predicting things, I would already be retired. In terms of, you know, your language and your cultural skills, I think that's a very important thing that, you know, the U.S. government needs is people who can, you know, I speak very broken Chinese. I did 25,000 visa interviews in Shanghai, and like that, I can't communicate in the way that you would be able to. And so that's, you know, there's going to be a whole slew of roles where that's very valuable. And so it's just finding the place that will, you know, take advantage of that and let you leverage it to then do other meaningful work. Yeah.
Students at school for graduate level, and those who are interested in taking tech policy within the State Department,
Yep.
what supplemental skills might you suggest that they get beyond what they might get at a master's degree at a business?
So I think time in industry is very helpful, in part because a lot of the U.S. government's not driving tech innovation, and so being able to very quickly build rapport with industry is very important. So when I'm, you know, in Peru and I'm working with our tech companies, but also startups there, having spent a little bit of time in industry is helpful. And then the other thing that a lot of your students will already have is just building out the language skills and time abroad so that they can bring a perspective of, you know, whether it's Peace Corps or whatever it is that they've studied abroad. That also gives them just one more lens of, all right, what are the tech challenges that Google is facing in Armenia? That will provide one more lens that will kind of make them stand out as they try to work at that intersection of geopolitics and tech. Yeah.
Hey Justin, could you speak a little bit about the way that your philosophy for tech values have guided your journey through the federal service, the
Mm-hmm.
private sector, and also how you've been able to find satisfaction in your work at the State Department?
Sure. I didn't pursue a normal foreign service path. I like working on really, my theory when I came in was I wanted to try and understand places I think America struggles to understand. So China, Russia, Iran. I was able to do that through a series of just stubbornness and luck. And so I think it's, you know, trying to find the big challenges that excite you and you think are worthwhile. Like we knew that Facebook was having real problems with keeping people safe. Like that was not a secret. And so when there was a chance to go out there and try to make a real effort to push some of those metrics in a positive direction, that was exciting to me. I also tend to move on when I get bored. And so, you know, 2.5 years at Facebook, I think I got as far as I could, and then it was time to try to find a new adventure. Yeah. So, and I think, and Jonathan Rose is here as well. He's worked in the Cyber and Digital Policy Bureau and on the Hill, so he can speak to this too after. There's lots of good people here you should all network with. And Courtney, I'll call you out as well as a AAAS fellow. But the way the reorg is going to do, it's going to solve a lot of the overlap that was just, it would never have passed an entrance exam to McKinsey or any of the consulting firms if you asked them to design how the State Department should function in tech. So diplomatic technology will continue to be the part of the State Department that says, how do we use technology in the department to do our work? And this is getting really in the weeds, we'll have a tech diplomacy bureau that's going to focus on all the things that my team does, plus subsea cables, satellites, digital economy, multilateral negotiations, et cetera. We'll have cybersecurity jobs in the Paul Mill Bureau. We'll have, within the Political Military Bureau, we're going to also have all the work on AI and weapons, so all the stuff on the defense side, that's going to be there. And then my goal over the next 3 to 4 years is to make sure that at every post overseas, we've got either a local staff or an officer covering the full gamut of the tech space. We've traditionally lumped environment, science, technology all into one bucket. That's not good enough, so we're working on expanding that as well. So there'll be positions overseas and then headquarter positions across several different bureaus. Yeah. There we go.
I just was wondering if you could speak to a little bit more of the future you envision for people who are doing language acquisition in the age of AI,
Yep.
because there's a lot of like, I don't know, focus on translation, automated translation, interpretation.
Sure. So I'm biased. I've spent 3 or 4 years trying to learn languages and not being super successful, but it opens doors in ways that communicating via translation apps won't. I think there's going to be real value in the way that the apps will help facilitate common and casual conversations, but if you're trying to build long-term relationships, being able to do so fluently in the language is just a whole nother level of comfort that you're able to unlock, especially with people that are going to be skeptical of engaging with a U.S. official. And so, my broken Chinese can get me so far with people in China, but like it's not going to be the same as someone who can immediately come in and have that kind of common ground and understanding. I know I've only got 1 minute left, so we'll do a couple. Yeah.
So what are some of the resources that you leveraged or also when you made a switch from public to private sector?
Yep.
Because not only you have to find the right fit, but there are ethics rules that you
Yep.
have to kind of be cautious about.
Yep. So when I moved to the private sector, I was in language training, so luckily I didn't have any conflict of interest concerns, but I leveraged the heck out of my friends who are already there. So the couple that helped me get to Facebook, they took me to dinner before my first interview in Menlo Park, and they were like, you are absolutely not wearing a suit. Like, they went to the point of critiquing my whole outfit, and they were like, you must wear jeans, you must know you are not wearing your dress shoes, and I was like, this is ridiculous. And they're like, you are wearing a t-shirt and a like fleece type thing. I was like, so the compromise was basically a button-down shirt for my comfort, but then I had the like, J. Crew fleece, jeans, shoes, because I have to overcome the stereotype that government workers move too slow, can't focus on impact, we're going to be long-winded. So I'm trying to combat that in part by how I dress. So and they also coached me through like, how do I give a 30-second answer instead of a 4-minute one, which you can see today I'm still working on. But my time is up. I'm very excited. I'm going to be followed. I can't do an intro as well as my colleague over here, so I will hand it over to him.
Ladies and gentlemen, please thank with a warm round of applause the Director of Tech Policy for the U.S. State Department, Mr. Justin Reynolds.